They wanted to make this place my grave, but today, it becomes theirs.
The first thing I noticed wasn't the throbbing in my skull or the antiseptic smell burning my nostrils. It was the way Nurse Sheila kept glancing at the door like she expected the Grim Reaper to waltz in wearing scrubs. "Mr. Mallory, you're awake." Her voice carried that forced cheerfulness that medical professionals perfect when delivering bad news. "How are you feeling?" "Roofing. Like I'd been hit by a freight train driven by my mother-in-law. But I kept that observation to myself. "Been better. What happened?" Sheila's eyes darted to the door again. "Your wife said you fell down the basement stairs, hit your head on the concrete floor." Relinquish. The basement stairs, right. Except I remembered being in our bedroom, not the basement. I remembered Claire's startled gasp, the sound of scrambling feet, and then nothing. "Funny thing about head injuries," Sheila continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Sometimes they don't match the story." Before I could ask what she meant, she pressed something into my palm. A small envelope, the kind you'd use for a thank you note. "A 13-year-old boy left this for you yesterday. Said to watch it alone, before anyone else came to visit." Her eyes met mine with an intensity that made my already aching head throb harder. "Your injuries, Mr. Mallory, they're consistent with blunt force trauma. Multiple impacts. Someone knock you and knock you good." The envelope felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Your wife will be here soon," Sheila added, straightening up as footsteps echoed in the hallway. "She's been very concerned about your recovery." "I'll bet she has." After Sheila left, I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a USB drive and a note written in the careful block letters of a kid trying to be neat. "Mr. Mallory, I saw what happened through your bedroom window. I was in my treehouse. I'm sorry. Milo. Milo Henderson, the kid next door. 13 years old with a telescope and too much curiosity for his own good. Usually, that combination annoyed the hell out of me. Today, it might have saved my life." I plugged the drive into the tablet someone had left on my bedside table. The video was shaky, shot through a window from about 30 feet away, but the audio was crystal clear. There I was, standing in my own bedroom doorway. There was Claire, undressed as the day she was born, scrambling to pull a sheet around herself. And there was Evan Royce, my wife's cousin, equally undressed and significantly less concerned about modesty. "Jack, I can explain." Claire's voice came through tinny but distinct. "Explain what? That you're screwing your cousin in our bed?" My recorded voice was surprisingly calm. I'd always prided myself on keeping cool under pressure. "He's not my blood cousin," Claire snapped back, and I had to admire her priorities. Even caught red-handed, she was worried about technicalities. Evan, meanwhile, had grabbed his pants and was trying to edge toward the door. "Look, Jack, this isn't what it looks like. Really, because it looks like you're screwing my wife." Crimson Hand's face changed. The embarrassment vanished, replaced by something uglier. "Yeah, well, maybe if you satisfied her, she wouldn't need a real man." I watched myself take a step forward. "A real man? You're 38 years old and you've never held a job for more than 6 months. At least I don't smell like sawdust and sweat." But Evan was ready. He grabbed a heavy glass award from Claire's dresser, some corporate recognition thing from her HR job, and swung it like a club. The first blow caught me across the temple. I staggered but didn't go down. The second one, a vicious uppercut to my jaw, sent me reeling backward. The third, a downward strike to the crown of my head, dropped me like a sack of concrete. "Evan, stop!" Claire's scream was piercing. "You'll eliminate him." "Maybe I should," Evan growled, raising the award again. "No, we need him alive. If he dies, they'll investigate. They'll find out about us." Afghanistan wore his weapon, breathing hard. "So what do we do?" "We make it look like an accident. Help me carry an accident. Help me carry him to the basement." Video ended there, but I'd seen enough. My loving wife of 12 years and her dirtbag cousin had knocked me unconscious and staged an accident to cover their tracks. The door opened and Claire walked in, carrying flowers and wearing her most concerned expression. "Jack! Oh, honey, you're awake. I was so worried." She rushed to my bedside, and I had to fight every instinct not to flinch away from her touch. "How are you feeling? The doctor said you might have some memory loss from the concussion." "I'm fine," I managed. "Just tired." "Do you remember what happened?" I looked into her eyes, those same green eyes I'd fallen in love with 13 years ago, and saw nothing but calculation. "No," I lied. "Nothing after dinner." Relief flickered across her face so quickly I almost missed it. "The doctor said that's normal. You fell down the basement stairs. Hit your head on the concrete. I found you unconscious. Must have been some fall. It was terrible. There was so much life fluid." She squeezed my hand, and her touch made my skin crawl. "I thought I'd lost you." "Yeah, right. The only thing she'd lost was her afternoon entertainment." "Where's Evan?" I asked, watching her reaction carefully. "Evan? Why would you ask about Evan?" "Just wondering. Hasn't he been staying with us this week?" Another flicker of panic. "Yes, but he left yesterday morning. Some job interview in Portland." More lies. At this rate, she was going to wear out her tongue. A knock at the door interrupted us, and Detective Donna Harker walked in. I knew Donna from the Millstone Bar, where she occasionally stopped for a beer after her shift. She was in her 40s, with graying hair, and the kind of skeptical expression that came from 20 years of listening to people lie. "Mr. Mallory, I'm Detective Harker. I need to ask you a few questions about your accident." Claire tensed beside me. "Is that really necessary? He just woke up." "Allergies. Just routine, ma'am. Won't take long." Donna's eyes never left my face. "Mr. Mallory, do you remember falling down the stairs?" Unleashed. "No, I don't remember anything." Manslaughter. Your injuries are pretty severe for a simple fall. Multiple contusions, significant trauma to your skull. You're lucky to be alive." "I guess I am." Made some notes in her pad. "Mrs. Mallory, you said you found your husband at the bottom of the basement stairs?" "That's right. Around 6 o'clock yesterday evening." "And where were you when the accident occurred?" "Upstairs, making dinner. I heard a crash and went to investigate." "Did anyone else witness the fall?" Claire's grip on my hand tightened. "Well, let me so far from this." Claire's grip on my hand tightened. "No, we were alone in the house." Nodded and closed her notepad. "Well, accidents happen. You folks take care." After she left, Claire visibly relaxed. "That was strange. Why would they send a detective for an accident?" "Maybe it's standard procedure for head injuries," I suggested. "Maybe," but she didn't sound convinced. That evening, after Claire finally left to get some rest, I called Detective Harker from the hospital phone. "Detective, this is Jack Mallory. We need to talk." "About your accident?" "Unborn. About my attempted homicide." There was a pause. "I'll be right there." 10 minutes later, Donna was back in my room, this time with a laptop and a very different expression. "Show me what you've got, Jack." I played her the video. She watched it twice without saying a lot. I started to preve them with, "Watched it twice without saying a word." "This is pretty damning evidence," she finally said. "But there are problems. The video was taken illegally, through a window. It might not be admissible in court." "What about the attack?" "That's clear as day." "It is, but Evan could claim self-defense. He could say you attacked first, and the video just shows him defending himself." "That's BS, and you know it." "Let's take the lead unless that's BS, and you know it. What I know and what I can prove in court are two different things." She closed the laptop. "But I can bring them in for questioning." "Do it." "Jack, I need to warn you. If we move on this and it doesn't stick, they'll know you remember everything. That could put you in danger." I thought about Claire's performance earlier. All that fake concern and manufactured tears. "Detective, I'm already in danger. At least this way, I'll see it coming." They arrested Evan the next morning. I watched from my hospital window as 2 patrol cars pulled up to the house, and officers led him away in handcuffs. Claire stood on the front porch in her bathrobe, playing the role of the shocked and confused wife to perfection. By noon, he was out on bail. "Insufficient evidence for attempted homicide," Detective Harker explained when she called. His lawyer argued self-defense, and without additional witnesses, we can't prove intent to cause serious bodily damage. So he just walks free? For now, but we've opened an investigation. Sometimes these things take time. Manslaughter. Right. While they were taking their time, Claire and Evan were probably planning their next move. I discharged myself that afternoon, against medical advice and Claire's theatrical protests. Jack, you need to rest. The doctor said you should stay another day for observation. I'm fine. I want to go home. But what if you have complications? What if... Claire. I turned to face her, and something in my expression made her step back. I said I'm fine. The house felt different when we walked through the front door. Everything looked the same. Claire's decorative pillows arranged just so on the couch. Her collection of scented candles on the mantelpiece. The family photos that now seemed like evidence of a lie. But the atmosphere had changed. This wasn't my sanctuary anymore. It was enemy territory. I'll make you some soup, Claire offered. You should eat something. I'm not hungry. You need to keep your strength up. What I need is some fresh air. I'm going to the garage. Theft had always been my refuge. Claire never came out here, claimed it smelled like oil and sawdust. She wasn't wrong, but those were comforting smells to me. Honest smells. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Pete's Security Solutions. Big Pete speaking. Pete, it's Jack Mallory. Jack, Jesus, I heard about your accident. How you holding up? But Pete Morrison had been my best friend since high school. We'd served together in Middle East, came home and went our separate ways. Me into construction, him into private security. He was 6'4", built like a linebacker, and had the kind of suspicious mind that made him excellent at his job. I need to see you. Tonight. And Pete, don't mention this call to anyone. Sounds serious. Is. We met at Murphy's Diner, a 24-hour greasy spoon on the outskirts of town. Pete was already in a back booth when I arrived, nursing a cup of coffee and looking concerned. You look like hell, he said by way of greeting. Feel worse. I slid into the booth across from him. Pete, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this table. Understood. I told him everything. The video, the attack, Claire's lies, Evan's release. Pete listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. Son of a witch, he muttered when I finished. So what do you want to do about it? I want to know everything there is to know about Evan Royce. His finances, his business dealings, his criminal history, his favorite brand of underwear. Everything. Trolley. That's cost you. Unrestricted. How much? For you? Just expenses. But Jack, if we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it. No half measures, no amateur hour BS. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. Agreed. Pete pulled out a small notebook and started writing. First things first, we need surveillance equipment. Cameras, audio devices, GPS trackers. I've got contacts who can get us everything we need, no questions asked. What about the legal issues? Well, what legal issues? I'm a licensed private investigator. You're my client. As long as we don't break any laws, we're golden. And if we need to bend a few laws? And for a moment, he looked like the same crazy fool who'd talked his way into 3 Purple Hearts and a dishonorable discharge. Then we don't get caught. Over the next 2 days, Pete worked his magic. He installed micro cameras throughout the house, so small they were virtually invisible. He put GPS trackers on both Claire's car and Evan's pickup truck. He even managed to clone Claire's cell phone, giving us access to all her calls and text messages. How the hell did you manage that? I asked as he demonstrated the monitoring software. Trade secrets. Let's just say your wife isn't as careful with her personal information as she should be. The first breakthrough came on Thursday evening. Claire thought I was asleep, knocked out by the pain medication she'd been pushing on me all week. Instead, I was in the garage, monitoring the feeds from Pete's equipment. Claire was on the phone in the kitchen, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. No, Evan, you can't come here. It's too risky. I don't care what you need. We have to be careful. Because the police are watching. That's why. What do you mean watching? They questioned me for 2 hours today. My blood pressure spiked. 2 hours? She told me it was a brief follow-up interview. They asked about our relationship, about how long you'd been staying here, about what we were doing when Jack had his accident. I stuck to the story, but that detective, Harker, she's not buying it. No, I don't think Jack remembers anything. He's been acting normal. Well, as normal as he ever acts. Thanks for the ringing endorsement, sweetheart. We need to lay low for a while. Let things cool down. I know it's hard, but we don't have a choice. Once this blows over, we can figure out our next move. What do you mean, next move? Evan, we talked about this. Yes, I know what I said, but that was before he almost died. Because I'm not a butcher, that's why. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, but I'd heard enough. They were planning something, and whatever it was, it didn't bode well for my continued existence. The next morning, I confronted Claire over breakfast. How did your interview with Detective Harker go yesterday? Claire nearly choked on her coffee. Interview? Oh, that. It was fine, just routine questions. She was here for 2 hours. That seems like more than routine. Was it 2 hours? I guess time flies when you're being interrogated about your husband's accident. She forced a laugh. They wanted to know about Evan, about how long he'd been staying here, that sort of thing. What did you tell them? The truth. That he's been looking for work. That he's been staying in the guest room. That he left for a job interview the morning of your accident. Every word was a lie, delivered with the kind of sincerity that would have fooled me a week ago. Did they say when they might arrest him again? Relinquits? Arrest him? Jack, they only arrested him because of some anonymous tip. They don't have any real evidence. Anonymous tip, right. I wondered if she actually believed that, or if she was just testing me. I'm going to the hardware store, I announced, standing up from the table. What for? Locks. If Evan's going to be coming and going, I want to make sure the house is secure. Claire's face went pale. You don't think he's family. Familiar rife who put me in the hospital. That was an accident, Jack. A fight that got out of hand. I stared at her. A fight? I thought I fell down the stairs. She realized her mistake immediately. I meant if there had been a fight. Hypothetically. Right, hypothetically. I left her sitting at the kitchen table, probably wondering how much I actually remembered. The truth was, I remembered everything now. Not just the attack, but the months leading up to it. Claire's late nights at the office, her sudden interest in working out, the way she'd started dressing differently, wearing perfume to the grocery store, buying lingerie that never made an appearance in our bedroom. All the classic signs, and I'd missed every damn one of them. At the hardware store, I bought more than locks. I bought a security system, motion sensors, and a small digital camera designed for hunting. If they wanted to play games, I'd make sure I had a front row seat. That evening, Pete called with his preliminary report on Evan Royce. Your boy's got quite a resume, he said. 3 DUIs, 2 domestic violence charges that were dropped, and a bankruptcy from 2018. He's been living off credit cards and family handouts for the past 2 years. What about employment? Spotty at best. He's had 17 different jobs in the last 5 years. Everything from car sales to restaurant management. Never lasted more than 8 months anywhere. So he's a loser with expensive tastes. He's driving a brand new pickup truck that costs more than most people make in a year. And according to his social media, he's been taking your wife to some pretty upscale restaurants. That explained where Claire's overtime pay had been going. There's something else, Pete continued. I did some digging into his financial records. 3 months ago, he made a cash deposit of $25,000. Where did he get 25 grand? That's what I'm trying to figure out. There's no record of him selling anything valuable. No inheritance, no lottery winnings. The money just appeared. Keep digging, shall? Already on it. But Jack, I need to warn you about something. I've been monitoring his communications, and he's been asking around about you. Your schedule, your habits, where you go when you're not at home. Aremian. He's planning something. Looks that way. You need to be careful. Maybe consider staying somewhere else for a while. Underside. No, this is my house and I'm not running. Presumption. Then at least start carrying protection. I can get you a concealed carry permit in 48 hours. Championship. Do it. Relinquish. After hanging up with Pete, I sat in my garage workshop staring at the tools I'd collected over 20 years of construction work. Hammers, saws, drills, nail tools. All of them capable of inflicting serious damage in the right hands. But I wasn't planning to hurt anyone. I was planning something much worse. I was going to destroy them. The audio surveillance paid off big time on Saturday night. Claire thought I was passed out in front of the TV, but I was actually in the garage, listening to her phone conversation with her sister Linda. I don't know what to do, Claire was saying. Jack's been acting strange since the accident. Suspicious. Suspicious how? Linda asked. Asking questions. About Evan. About my interview with the police. It's like he knows something. Relinquish. Does he remember what happened? There was a long pause. I don't think so. The doctor said the memory loss might be permanent. But he's different now. Cold. Fingered. Maybe you should end things with Evan, at least until this blows over. I can't. Linda, you don't understand. I'm in love with him. I nearly laughed out loud. Love. Right. She was in love with an unemployed heavy drinker who'd knocked her husband unconscious. Claire, be realistic. Evan's got no money, no job, no prospects. Jack's a good man with a steady income and a house that's almost paid off. Jack's boring. He comes home every day covered in sawdust, watches sports on TV, and falls asleep by 10 o'clock. Evan makes me feel alive. Alive enough to risk everything? Shall. You don't know what it's like being married to someone who takes you for granted. Jack hasn't told me I'm beautiful in years. He doesn't surprise me, doesn't make me laugh, doesn't make me feel special. So you decided to blackmail. So you decided to screw his cousin? Emmers, not his blood cousin. He's the son of Jack's aunt's second husband. There's no actual relation. That's not the point, and you know it. Claire sighed. I know, Claire sighed. I know it's complicated, but I can't help how I feel. When I'm with Evan, I feel like the woman I used to be. Before marriage and mortgages and all the rest of it. The woman you used to be was 23 and stupid. Thanks for the support, sis. I'm trying to be realistic. Let's say you leave Jack for Evan. What then? You'll lose half of everything in the divorce. And Evan can't even support himself, let alone a wife. Imprisonment. We've talked about that. Evan has some business opportunities coming up. Big opportunities. What kind of opportunities? Rejection. I can't get into details, but let's just say money won't be a problem much longer. Business opportunities. That was interesting, especially considering Pete's discovery of Evan's mysterious $25,000 windfall. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, but I'd heard the important parts. Claire was planning to leave me for Evan, and Evan had some kind of money-making scheme in the works. On Monday morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day following Evan. He was staying at a cheap motel on Route 1, paying cash for a week at a time. At 9:30, he drove to a coffee shop downtown and met with a man I didn't recognize. Mid-40s, expensive suit. The kind of guy who screamed, lawyer or accountant. Then they talked for an hour, passing documents back and forth across the table. I couldn't get close enough to hear the conversation, but I managed to get some photos with the telephoto lens Pete had given me. When the meeting ended, Evan drove to the bank and made another cash deposit. This time, it was $15,000. That evening, Pete ran the photos through his facial recognition software. Your mystery man is Marcus Webb, he announced. He's a real estate developer with offices in Portland and Boston. Also happens to be under federal investigation for money laundering. Ruggaz, the FBI thinks he's been washing pill money through legitimate real estate transactions. They've been building a case against him for 2 years. And Evan's involved? Looks that way. I did some more digging into his finances. Over the past 3 months, he's made 4 separate cash deposits totaling $68,000. All of them within 24 hours of meeting with Webb. So he's a pill dealer now? Misinformation. More likely a courier or a middleman. Webb needs people to move money around. People who aren't on law enforcement's radar. Evan fits the profile perfectly. Desperate for cash, no steady employment, willing to take risks. This was getting better and better. Not only was my wife cheating on me with an unemployed loser, but the unemployed loser was also a federal criminal. Pete, I need you to document everything. Every meeting, every transaction, every phone call. If we're going to take these people down, we need evidence that will hold up in court. Already on it. But Jack, if Evan's working with Webb, He's playing in the big leagues now. These aren't the kind of people who just disappear quietly when they're exposed. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to be very careful about how we handle this. One wrong move, and we could end up in a lot more trouble than a cheating wife and an attack charge. He was right, of course, but I was past the point of caring about my personal safety. Claire and Evan had tried to destroy my life. Now it was my turn. The next breakthrough came on Wednesday evening. Claire was working late again, or at least, that's what she told me. In reality, she was at Evan's motel room, and thanks to Pete's surveillance equipment, I had a front row seat to their reunion. The audio quality wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. "I missed you," Claire said as soon as she walked through the door. "Missed you too, baby. How's the invalid?" "Shields, still suspicious. He's been asking questions about you, about where you've been staying." "What did you tell him?" "That you left town for a job interview. But I don't think he believes me. Maybe it's time to consider more permanent solutions." "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean. Jack's a problem that's not going away. The longer he's alive, the more likely he is to remember what happened. Evan, we talked about this. I'm not a butcher. You don't have to be. Accidents happen all the time. Construction sites are dangerous places. You want to homicide my husband? I want to solve our problem. Claire, think about it. If Jack dies, you inherit everything. The house, his life insurance, his retirement account. We're talking about $500,000, maybe more. And if we get caught, we won't get caught. It'll look like an accident, just like last time. Last time didn't work out so well, because we weren't prepared. This time, we'll plan it properly." I listened to them discuss my homicide for another 10 minutes, working out details like they were planning a vacation. Claire was reluctant, but Evan was persistent, and I could hear her resolve weakening with every argument. By the time she left the motel room, they'd agreed to think about it for a few more days. I'd heard enough. The next morning, I called Detective Harker and arranged to meet her at the police station. "Jack, you look terrible," she said when I walked into her office. "I feel terrible, but I've got something you need to hear." Sheriff played her the recordings from the motel room. She listened with a poker face, taking notes but not revealing her thoughts. "This is good," she said when the recording ended. "Conspiracy to commit homicide is a serious charge, but there are still problems. Such as? The recording was made without their consent. Depending on how it was obtained, it might not be admissible in court. What if I told you I had more evidence? Financial records, photographs, documentation of Evan's involvement with known criminals?" Harker leaned forward. "I'd say you've been busy." I spent the next hour laying out everything Pete and I had discovered. Evan's connection to Marcus Webb, the mysterious cash deposits, the money laundering operation. By the time I finished, Harker was looking impressed despite herself. "Jack, this is federal-level stuff. If even half of what you're telling me is true, we're talking about a major criminal enterprise. So what happens now?" "Now I make some phone calls. The FBI has been looking for a way to get closer to Webb's operation. Your friend Evan might be just the opening they need. And Claire? If we can prove she's been helping them, we can prove she's involved in the conspiracy to homicide you. She'll go down with the rest of them. How long will it take?" These things move slowly. Federal investigations can take months, sometimes years. I don't have months. They're planning to eliminate me. Studied my face for a long moment. "Jack, I'm going to give you some unofficial advice. Be very careful. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't follow any predictable routines. And for God's sake, don't confront them directly. What if I told you I had a different plan?" "I'd say I don't want to hear it. Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. Let us handle this. Like you handled it when Evan was released on bail? That's not fair. Neither is being knocked and unconscious in my own bedroom." I left the police station more frustrated than ever. The wheels of justice moved too slowly, and I was running out of time. That evening, Pete called with more bad news. "They're accelerating their timeline," he said. I intercepted a text from Evan to Claire. They're meeting tomorrow night to finalize their plans. Plans for what? Your unfortunate accident at the construction site. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my garage, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects, planning my counterattack. Claire and Evan wanted to play games? Fine. But they were about to learn that I'd been underestimating myself for years. The next morning, I called my foreman and told him I wouldn't be coming to work. "You sure, Jack? We're behind schedule on the Morrison project." "I'm sure. I'm still having headaches from the concussion." "Take all the time you need. Your health comes first." If only he knew. At 10 o'clock, Claire left for work, kissing me goodbye like the loving wife she pretended to be. As soon as her car disappeared around the corner, I got to work. First, I called Pete. "I need you to set up surveillance on the construction site. Every entrance, every exit, every angle. If they're planning to stage an accident there, I want it all on video." "Jack, this is dangerous. If they catch you, they won't catch me. But if something goes wrong, I want evidence of what really happened." Next, I called my insurance agent. "Hi, this is Jack Mallory. I need to update my life insurance policy." "What kind of update, Mr. Mallory?" "I want to remove my wife as the beneficiary and replace her with my sister Linda." "That's a significant change. Can I ask why?" "Personal reasons." "How quickly can it take effect?" "We can process the paperwork today, but there's usually a waiting period for major changes like this. 30 days is standard." "Have it happen." The third call was to my lawyer. "Bill, it's Jack Mallory. I need to update my will." "Everything all right, Jack?" "Just being cautious. I want to make sure Linda gets the house and all my assets if something happens to me." "What about Claire?" "Claire gets nothing." There was a pause. "Jack, that's highly unusual. In Maine, spouses have certain legal rights. Find a way around it. I'll be in your office this afternoon to sign whatever needs to be signed." By noon, I'd set my legal affairs in order. If Claire and Evan wanted to eliminate me for my money, they were in for a nasty surprise. At 2 o'clock, I drove to the construction site to scout the location. The Morrison project was a new office building, 4 stories of steel and concrete rising from what used to be a vacant lot. It was the kind of place where accidents happened regularly. Falling tools, unstable scaffolding, equipment malfunctions. The perfect place for homicide, disguised as workplace mishap. I walked the perimeter, identifying potential danger zones. The crane operator's platform, 30 feet above the ground. The elevator shaft, currently just a hole in the floor with temporary barriers. The electrical panel, where a careless worker might be electrocuted. Any of them would work for Evan's purposes. I was examining the crane controls when my phone buzzed. Text message from Claire. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Presumption. Chapter." At 6 o'clock, I positioned myself in an abandoned office building across the street from the construction site. Pete had set up a command post there, complete with monitors showing feeds from a dozen hidden cameras. "They're coming," Pete announced at 7:30. On the screen, I watched Evan's pickup truck pull into the construction site parking lot. A moment later, Claire's sedan followed. They parked side by side and got out, both dressed in dark clothing. "Can you hear what they're saying?" I asked. Pete adjusted his equipment. "Not yet. They're too far from the microphones. But watch this." Amongst the screen, Evan was pointing at different parts of the construction site, gesturing like he was explaining something. Claire nodded along, occasionally asking questions I couldn't hear. "They're planning it out," I said. "Looks that way. Jack, are you sure about this? We could call the police right now." "And tell them what? That my wife and her boyfriend are trespassing on a construction site? They haven't actually done anything illegal yet. Conspiracy to commit homicide is illegal. Imprisoned. We need proof of intent. This could just be a romantic evening among the heavy machinery." We watched for another 20 minutes as Evan showed Claire around the site. He spent a lot of time near the crane, pointing up at the operator's platform and the massive steel hook that hung from the boom. Finally, they moved close enough to one of Pete's microphones for us to hear their conversation. "Looks like an accident," Evan was saying. "Jack comes to work early, before anyone else gets here. He climbs up to check something on the crane, maybe a mechanical problem. The platform gives way, and he falls 30 feet onto concrete. What if someone investigates? Who's going to investigate? It's a construction site. Accidents happen all the time. But the platform, won't they be able to tell it was sabotaged? Not if we do it right. A few loosened bolts, some strategic wear on the safety cables. It'll look like normal equipment failure." Claire was quiet for a moment. "When?" "Tomorrow morning. Jack always gets to work sites early, around 6:30. The rest of the crew doesn't show up until 8. How do we make sure he goes up to the platform? I'll call him tonight. Tell him I saw something wrong with the crane when I drove by earlier. Jack's responsible. He'll want to check it out personally. And you'll be where? Miles away, with a solid alibi. This has to look like an accident, which means I can't be anywhere near the site when it happens. What about me? You'll be at home, sleeping peacefully. When the police call to tell you about your husband's tragic accident, you'll be devastated. They spent another 10 minutes working out the details, and I recorded every word. When they finally left the construction site, I had enough evidence to put them both away for conspiracy to commit homicide. But I wasn't going to the police. Not yet. Instead, I was going to give them exactly what they wanted. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30, just like always. Claire was still asleep, or pretending to be. I showered, got dressed, and made coffee, following my normal routine. At 6 o'clock, my phone rang. Evan, right on schedule. Jack? It's Evan. Listen, I was driving by the Morrison site last night, and I think there might be a problem with your crane. What kind of problem? The platform looked like it was sagging, like maybe some of the support cables are loose. I put just the right amount of concern in my voice. Are you sure? Pretty sure. You might want to check it out before your crew gets there. Yeah, I'll head over there now. Thanks for letting me know. No problem. Family looks out for family, right? Family. The irony was almost too much to bear. I hung up the phone and grabbed my keys. Claire stirred in bed. Where are you going so early? She mumbled. Construction site. Evan thinks there might be a problem with the crane. Be careful. I will. I drove to the Morrison site, but I wasn't alone. Pete was already in position across the street, monitoring everything through his cameras. Detective Harker was parked 2 blocks away, waiting for my signal. And in my pocket, I carried a small recording device that would capture every sound. The construction site was deserted, just as Evan had predicted. I parked my truck near the main entrance and walked toward the crane, playing my role perfectly. The platform was 30 feet above ground, accessible by a narrow steel ladder built into the crane's superstructure. Under normal circumstances, I would have used safety equipment, harness, hard hat, the works. But these weren't normal circumstances. I climbed the ladder slowly, checking each rung carefully. About halfway up, I found what I was looking for. 3 of the bolts holding the ladder to the crane had been loosened, just enough to make the structure unstable. A few more feet, and my weight would have caused the entire assembly to pull away from the crane. Instead of continuing up, I climbed back down and pulled out my phone. Pete, did you get that? Every second. The cameras caught Evan sabotaging the ladder last night, and we just recorded you discovering the damage. Perfect. Call Detective Harker. Millennium minutes later, the construction site was swarming with police. Crime scene technicians photographed the sabotaged ladder from every angle, while Detective Harker took my statement. This is attempted homicide, no question, she said. The evidence is overwhelming. What happens now? Now we arrest them. They picked up Evan first, at the diner where he'd been establishing his alibi. According to Pete, who monitored the arrest through police scanner, Evan actually seemed surprised when they read him his rights. Claire was harder to find. She'd left work early, claiming she felt sick. They finally tracked her down at her sister Linda's house, where she was apparently planning to wait for news of my accident. I was at the police station when they brought her in. She saw me through the window of the interrogation room, and the look on her face was worth everything I'd been through. Shock, betrayal, and finally, the dawning realization that she'd been outplayed. The arraignment hearing was scheduled for Monday morning. By Sunday evening, the whole town knew about the arrests. Claire Mallory and Evan Royce, charged with conspiracy to commit homicide and attempted homicide. It was the biggest scandal Millstone had seen in years. I spent Sunday afternoon at the Millstone bar, accepting condolences and free drinks from half the town. Word had gotten out about the affair, too, and public opinion was firmly on my side. I never liked that Evan, said Tommy Morrison, the bar owner. Always struck me as shifty. And Claire, added Sarah Chen, who worked at the bank, acting like the perfect wife while she was screwing around behind your back. Makes me sick. The comments were gratifying, but I wasn't there for sympathy. I was there to gather intelligence. Jack, I heard they might make bail, said Detective Harker. who'd stopped by for a beer after her shift. Both of them? Evan's bail is set at $500,000. Claire's is $250,000. Evan's got no way to raise that kind of money. But Claire might be able to mortgage the house. The house. Our house. The thought of Claire using our home as collateral to buy her freedom made my blood boil. Can she do that? Use the house for bail? If her name's on the deed, yes. Relieved. We'd bought the house together 12 years ago. Both our names on the mortgage and the title. Another detail I'd overlooked in my planning. There might be a way around it, Harker continued. If you can prove she used marital assets to fund criminal activity, a judge might freeze her accounts. What kind of proof would I need? Bank records? Credit card statements? Anything showing them freezing her shift. And then I think that like this, neither card statements, anything showing she spent money in furtherance of the conspiracy. I thought about the expensive dinners Pete had mentioned, the upscale restaurants where Claire had been taking Evan, all paid for with our joint credit card. I might be able to find something. Just remember, Jack, whatever you do, it has to be legal. You're the sufferer here. Don't give them any ammunition to use against you. That night, I went through our financial records with a fine-tooth comb. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Over the past 3 months, Claire had spent more than $8,000 on restaurants, hotels, and shopping trips. All of it charged to our joint accounts, and all of it, apparently, for Evan's benefit. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the $25,000 she'd withdrawn from our savings account 2 weeks ago. The same amount that had appeared in Evan's bank account around the same time. She hadn't just been cheating on me. She'd been funding her affair with our money. I called Pete first thing Monday morning. I need you to document everything. Every transaction, every charge, every withdrawal. I want a complete financial picture of Claire's spending over the past 6 months. What are you planning? I'm going to make sure she can't use our house to buy her way out of jail. Bail hearing was at 10 o'clock. I sat in the back of the courtroom, watching as Claire and Evan were led in wearing orange jumpsuits and shackles. Claire looked terrible, pale, exhausted, her usually perfect hair hanging limp around her shoulders. Evan looked worse. 3 days in county lockup had not been kind to him. He had a black eye and a split lip, courtesy of some fellow inmates who didn't appreciate wife knockers. Claire's lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Wells, argued that her client was a pillar of the community, with deep roots in Millstone. She had a steady job, no prior criminal record, and strong ties to the area. She posed no flight risk, and deserved to be released on reasonable bail. The prosecutor disagreed. Claire Mallory and her co-conspirator had planned to homicide her husband for financial gain. They had sabotaged construction equipment and lured the sufferer into a death trap. This was premeditated, cold-blooded attempted homicide, and both defendants should be held without bail. Judge Morrison, no relation to Tommy from the bar, listened to both arguments before making his decision. Bail is set at $250,000 for Mrs. Mallory and $500,000 for Mr. Royce. Both defendants will surrender their passports and agree to electronic monitoring if released. Disresilenced. Claire's lawyer nodded confidently. Your Honor, Mrs. Mallory is prepared to post bail using her home as collateral. That's when I stood up. Your Honor, I object. The judge looked surprised. Mr. Mallory, you're not an attorney. You can't object to anything. Expelled. I'm sorry, Your Honor, but I have information relevant to the bail decision. Prosecutor, a young man named David Kim, looked intrigued. Your Honor, if Mr. Mallory has evidence of additional criminal activity, the court should hear it. Judge Morrison sighed. Very well. Mr. Mallory, approach the bench. I walked to the front of the courtroom, very aware that every eye was on me. Claire stared at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation. Your Honor, I have evidence that Mrs. Mallory used marital assets to fund the conspiracy against me. Over the past 3 months, she spent more than $30,000 of our joint money on her affair with Mr. Royce. I handed the judge a folder containing all the financial records Pete and I had compiled. This includes restaurant bills, hotel charges, cash withdrawals, and direct transfers to Mr. Royce's bank account. She was essentially paying him to help her eliminate me. Judge Morrison reviewed the documents quickly. Mr. Kim, does this change the state's position on bail? It does, Your Honor. If Mrs. Mallory used marital assets to fund criminal activity, those assets should be frozen, pending resolution of the case. Claire's lawyer was on her feet immediately. Objection. This is highly irregular. My client hasn't been charged with any financial crimes. But she has been charged with conspiracy to commit homicide, the judge replied. And if she used marital funds to further that conspiracy, Mr. Mallory has a legitimate claim to those assets. He turned to me. Mr. Mallory, are you requesting that the court freeze your wife's access to marital assets? I am, Your Honor. Motion granted. Mrs. Mallory's access to all joint accounts and jointly held property is hereby frozen until further notice. Bail will remain at $250,000, but it must be posted using assets that belong solely to the defendant. Claire's face went white. She had maybe $3,000 in her personal checking account, not nearly enough for bail. Your Honor, her lawyer pleaded, this effectively denies my client the right to bail. Your client has the right to reasonable bail, Judge Morrison corrected. She doesn't have the right to use stolen money to pay for it. Both Claire and Evan were remanded to custody. As they were led away, Claire turned to look at me one last time. The hatred in her eyes was pure and undiluted. Good. Now she knew how it felt to be betrayed. Outside the courthouse, I was surrounded by reporters and curious townspeople. Everyone wanted to know how I felt, what I planned to do next, whether I thought justice was being served. I'm just glad the truth came out, I told them. My wife and her boyfriend tried to eliminate me for money. Now they'll face the consequences. What about forgiveness? Asked Rebecca Santos from the local newspaper. Some people believe marriage vows should mean something, even in situations like this. I stared at her for a long moment. Rebecca, they knocked me unconscious in my own bedroom, then tried to drop a crane on my head. Exactly what am I supposed to forgive? That quote made the front page of the next day's paper. Over the next week, more details of the conspiracy came to light. The FBI had indeed been investigating Marcus Webb's money laundering operation, and Evan's involvement gave them the leverage they needed to move forward. Webb was arrested at his Boston office, along with 6 associates. Evan, facing federal charges in addition to the state charges, decided to cooperate. He gave up Webb's entire operation in exchange for a reduced sentence. But he also gave up something else: details of his relationship with Claire. According to Evan's statement, the affair had been going on for 8 months. Claire had initiated it, contacting him after his latest bankruptcy and offering him money in exchange for companionship. What started as a financial arrangement had evolved into something more serious. At least, it had for Claire. Evan's statement made it clear that he'd never had any real feelings for her. She was just a convenient source of income and Zex. She was obsessed with me, he told investigators. Called me 10 times a day, wanted to know where I was every minute. She started talking about leaving her husband after just a few weeks. The homicide plot had been Claire's idea. She said Jack was suspicious, that he was going to find out about us. She was worried about the divorce, about losing half of everything. She thought if Jack died in an accident, she'd inherit everything and we could be together. And you agreed to help her? She was paying me $5,000 a month. I needed the money. $5,000 a month. No wonder our savings account had been disappearing so quickly. The most damaging part of Evan's statement came at the end, when investigators asked him about his feelings for Claire. Did you love her? Love her? Hell no. She was pathetic, a middle-aged woman having a midlife crisis, throwing money at a younger man and thinking it was romance. I was planning to dump her as soon as I got back on my feet financially. Did you tell her this? I was going to, after we dealt with the Jack situation. I figured once he was dead and she had all his money, I could take my share and disappear. She never would have seen me again. Claire's lawyer showed her Evan's statement. She broke down completely. The man she'd risked everything for, the man she'd planned to homicide her husband for, had never cared about her at all. She fired her lawyer and decided to represent herself. It was a decision that would prove to be a costly mistake. The trial began on a cold February morning. 3 months after my accident. The courthouse was packed with reporters, curious townspeople, and legal observers who'd come to watch what the Portland Press-Herald called the trial of the decade. Claire had refused to accept a plea deal, insisting she was innocent of all charges. Evan, meanwhile, had pled guilty to conspiracy and attempted homicide in exchange for a 20-year sentence. He would testify against Claire as part of his cooperation agreement. I sat in the front row, directly behind the prosecutor's table, where Claire would have to look at me every day of the trial. The prosecution's case was devastating. They had video evidence of the original attack, audio recordings of Claire and Evan planning my homicide, physical evidence of the sabotaged crane, and Evan's detailed confession, describing Claire as the mastermind of the entire plot. Claire's defense, such as it was, relied on claiming that Evan had manipulated and coerced her into going along with his schemes. She portrayed herself as a sufferer, a lonely housewife who'd been seduced and controlled by a dangerous criminal. It might have worked if not for the audio recordings. On the third day of testimony, Prosecutor David Kim played the recording of Claire's phone conversation with her sister Linda. The jury heard Claire's own voice describing how boring her husband was, how Evan made her feel alive, and how she was in love with him. They heard her discussing my homicide like she was planning a dinner party. "We need to be smart about this," her recorded voice said through the courtroom speakers. "If it looks like an accident, no one will investigate too closely." Claire sat at the defense table, tears streaming down her face as her own words condemned her. But the most damaging testimony came from Evan himself. He took the stand on the fourth day, wearing a prison jumpsuit and shackles. The man who'd once seemed so confident and charismatic now looked broken and defeated. "Ms. Mallory contacted me in March of last year," he testified. "She said she was unhappy in her marriage and wanted companionship." "What kind of companionship?" Kim asked. "Sexual companionship. She offered to pay me $5,000 a month to be her boyfriend." "And you accepted?" "Yes, I was broke, facing eviction from my apartment. $5,000 was more money than I'd seen in months." "Did you have romantic feelings for Ms. Mallory?" "No, it was a business arrangement." "Did she know that?" "No. She thought it was She thought it was a business feelings." "No. She thought it was a business feelings." "No. She thought it was away from Ms. Mallory." "No. She thought it was a real relationship. She was obsessed with me, constantly calling, texting, wanting to spend every free moment together." "When did the subject of eliminating her husband first come up?" "She was worried that Jack was getting suspicious about her behavior. She said she couldn't afford to lose half of everything in a divorce." "What did she propose?" "That we make Jack's death look like an accident. She said if he died, she'd inherit everything: the house, his life insurance, his retirement accounts. We'd be rich and free to be together." "And you agreed?" "Eventually. She was very persuasive, and she was paying me a lot of money." "Did Ms. Mallory participate in planning her husband's homicide?" "She planned it. The whole thing was her idea. She researched his schedule, figured out when he'd be alone at the construction site, even suggested using the crane as the homicide weapon." "How did she suggest using the crane?" Accidents happen all the time. If Jack fell from the crane platform, it would look like equipment failure or human error. No one would investigate too closely." "Did she express any remorse about eliminating her husband?" "None at all. She said he was boring, that he took her for granted, that she deserved better. She talked about his death like it was just a problem to be solved." The xassing was brief. Claire, representing herself, could barely form coherent questions. She kept breaking down in tears, asking Evan why he was lying about her, why he was destroying her life. "I'm not lying," he replied calmly. "I'm telling the truth. You wanted your husband dead, and you paid me to help you eliminate him." "But you said you loved me." "I lied. You were paying me. I told you whatever you wanted to hear." Claire collapsed at the defense table, sobbing uncontrollably. The judge called a recess, but the damage was done. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. guilty on all counts. Judge Morrison sentenced Claire to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he read the sentence, she turned to look at me one last time. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I stood up and walked to the rail separating the gallery from the courtroom proper. "Happy? Claire, you tried to homicide me for money. You betrayed our marriage, stole our savings, and conspired with your boyfriend to drop a crane on my head. Happy doesn't begin to cover how I feel. I loved him. You love the idea of him. You love the excitement, the danger, the feeling of being desired. But you never loved him, and he never loved you. You threw away 12 years of marriage for a fantasy. Jack, I've your life in prison, Claire. Evan's going to be out in 20 years, probably less with good behavior. He'll move on, find someone else, maybe even get married and have kids. But you'll die behind bars, forgotten by everyone except the people whose lives you tried to destroy." Bailiff moved to escort Claire away, but I wasn't finished. "One more thing," I called after her. "I changed my will and my insurance beneficiaries. Even if your plan had worked, even if you'd succeeded in eliminating me, you wouldn't have gotten a penny. Everything goes to my sister Linda." Claire's legs buckled. The bailiff had to carry her from the courtroom. Outside, I was again surrounded by reporters and well-wishers. Everyone wanted to know how I felt, whether justice had been served, what I planned to do with the rest of my life. "I feel vindicated," I told them. "My wife and her boyfriend tried to destroy me, but instead they destroyed themselves. That's not justice. That's poetry." "What's next for you, Jack?" asked Rebecca Santos. "I'm going to rebuild my life. I'm going to focus on my work, spend time with friends and family, maybe even start dating again someday. I'm 40 years old. I've got a lot of living left to do." Unrest? Disregard. I thought about that question for a long moment. Did I regret marrying Claire? Did I regret trusting her, loving her, building a life with her? "I regret that it came to this," I finally said. "I regret that Claire chose betrayal over honesty, homicide over divorce, fantasy over reality. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret exposing the truth. And I don't regret winning." That evening, I threw a party at my house, the house that was now mine alone. Half the town showed up, bringing food and drinks and congratulations. Big Pete was there, along with Detective Harker, my sister Linda, and dozens of other friends and neighbors. "To Jack Mallory," Tommy Morrison raised his beer bottle in a toast. "A man who proved that sometimes the good guys really do win." Everyone drank to that, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy. Later, after the last guest had gone home, I sat alone in my living room, looking at the framed photos Claire had left behind. Pictures of our wedding, our honeymoon, family gatherings, anniversary dinners. The visual record of a marriage that had been alive for longer than I'd realized. I gathered up all the photos and carried them out to the backyard fire pit. One by one, I fed them to the flames, watching 12 years of fake memories turn to ash. When the last photo was gone, I went back inside and poured myself a whiskey. Tomorrow, I would start the process of truly moving on. I'd redecorate the house, maybe take a vacation, definitely start thinking about the future. But tonight, I was content to sit in my chair, in my house, surrounded by the silence of victory. Claire had wanted to feel alive again. Instead, she'd chosen a living death. Evan had wanted easy money. Instead, he'd earned 20 years in federal prison. They'd both underestimated the boring, predictable husband who came home covered in sawdust every day. That had been their fatal mistake. I raised my glass in a final toast to the empty room. "Here's to new beginnings," I said aloud, "and to the sweet taste of revenge."